to you folks. Time for another edition of the best album you never heard in your life. This one involves the Grateful Dead. It's their second studio album. It's called Anthem of the Sun. What I hold in my hand here is the 50th anniversary. It came out in 2018. You can see the hype sticker here, 180 gram black vinyl. The sound on this is pretty phenomenal. It uses the 1971 remix, not the original 1968 mix. To my ears, this one sounds a little more cohesive. It's a little smoother, glossier, maybe less separation. Both are great. I love the back cover of this, sort of this trippy, round fisheye view of the band. So a little bit of history of this album. It was released in July of 1968. It was their second album, and I said it was a studio album, but it's really a hybrid of live and studio, and they sort of mixed it together as a conglomeration, and to my knowledge, it's the first album that really did this. The Grateful Dead wanted to sort of encapsulate their live sound onto record, which they failed to do in their debut. And they were highly ambitious, but the problem was that the sessions for this album were fraught with difficulty. Kind of from the beginning, they ended up going to 5 or 6 different studios, disagreeing with their producer. In fact, their producer walked out on them and left about a third of the way through. The saying goes is that rhythm guitarist and co-lead singer Bob Weir wanted to capture on tape the sound of thick air. He had this ingenious idea of recording silence in the desert and silence in the city and combine the two. And it just proved to be too much, folks. Wait for it, wait for it. All right, so this album was really the brainchild of bassist Phil Lesh and lead guitarist Jerry Garcia. And here's Jerry recollecting many years later about what happened in the studio during this time.
Anthem of the Sun was like a chance for us to try a lot of things and to see what things might work and might not. Actually, when we mixed it for the hallucinations, you know? And we performed the mix. Phil and I performed the mix. We had it as though it were an electronic music composition. You know, he would do things and I would do things. We were working over each other and bring these faders up and those down and switching these things around. It was pretty intense, and we performed each side all the way through.
It's worth noting this album marked the debut recording of recently acquired second drummer Mickey Hart. All right, so what I'd like to show here is a small clip of the Grateful Dead playing an outdoor concert in the spring of 1968 at Columbia University in New York. And this little clip features the dual drumming of both Billy and Mickey, so check it out. One thing I feel obliged to comment on is Jerry's tone during this time. Just electrifying. I mean, listen to his solos and his sound that he gets out of his axe right here. Yeah, I feel compelled also to briefly talk about the instruments used on this album, which I think makes it unique as well. We're talking gongs, orchestra bells, harpsichord, chimes. They play kazoo on the track, alligator. Phil Lesh plays trumpet on the track Born Cross-Eyed, classically trained musician, so he brings his classical and jazz elements to the table. Also, this album I think is unique in the Grateful Dead canon because never before or since, at least in the studio, committed to on record, were they more experimental, more surrealistic and psychedelic. And it's just one of those albums that's really unique. And it's not even their best album by most Deadhead standards or even just casual listeners of the Grateful Dead. Most wouldn't go to Anthem of the Sun right off, but it really is a rewarding experience. So this album was on Warner Brothers, and they were a little disenchanted with the Grateful Dead at the time. That they were racking up a lot of time and expenses, and the Grateful Dead were very anti-authoritarian. They had their own vision. They didn't want to be told what to do. And when the album came out, it was met with moderate success in terms of sales. I think it climbed to number 87 on the Billboard chart position, which is respectable. And over the ensuing decades, this album has sold reasonably well, and I would wager now that Warner Brothers is certainly happy to have this in their catalog. But this album, in a lot of circles, has been talked about. Even Rolling Stone magazine includes it in the top 500 albums of all time. And a lot of Deadheads agree that 68 is like a great Primal Dead year. It's when they really started getting that telepathic collective vision on the stage and improvising. And Phil Lesh said something like each band member was like a finger representing a hand as a whole, to paraphrase him. And you can really hear that in the music. So I'm going to ask my 7-year-old Charlotte, what do you think of this album, Anthem of the Sun? You've heard me play it several times the last few days.
I like it.
What would you give it on a scale from 1 to 10?
A 9.
A 9. You hear that? Endorsement right there, folks. So long, till next time. All right, quick epilogue here. I started listening to the Grateful Dead when I was 15 or so. I had 3 uncles that were big Deadheads, and they introduced me. And then I went to boarding school in the mountains of Virginia, and there seemed to be a big Deadhead culture there. 2 years later, when I was 17 in 93, I saw my first Grateful Dead show, and then saw about 15 more with Jerry Garcia. And I look back on it now, and with great nostalgia and gratefulness for having been exposed to that great music and that culture. Sort of got my head laid, so to speak, not with chemicals, but just with the music. Be curious to hear your thoughts or experiences with this band, or particularly this album, Anthem of the Sun. And thanks for watching, and I tip my hat off to this band and to you guys, and so long until next time.